I always said that my tombstone would say, how hard it can be, but my wife disagrees. She thinks it should say, well, I didn't think this would happen. After our recent vacation, I think she might be right. Let me explain. My name is Dave, and I run a lifting company at Felixstowe Container Ports. This is what others call crane farming. I'm originally from Portsmouth, but moved here 10 years ago for work and have lived here ever since. My wife is Abigail. She is an administration manager at Morrison's Supermarkets, working in the regional office in Ipswich. Local girl, born and raised here. She is 35, I am 37. We have no children, but we have a cat. To be honest, it's more like her cat. I just feed him and clean up after him the dead animals he brings. We live in a nice 3-bedroom detached house on the new Wimpy Homes development in Martlesham. You know the kind of place I'm talking about. Attached garage, private bath in the master bedroom, cable TV. I play golf a couple of times a week with 3 friends, Barry, Paul, and Ken. Ken's real name is Norman, but from the age of 12 everyone calls him Ken because of his last name Chicken, which sounds like Kentucky chicken. Barry is a bit of a cheater at golf, claiming to be at 28 when he really should be around 18. But since he's pretty tough, a former paratrooper, and served in the French Foreign Legion, we put up with it. Paul runs a bouncy castle rental and ice cream business, and judging by his Mercedes and the girls he brings to his club nights, he's doing well. Abby is a size 12, curvy, with long blonde hair and blue eyes, with an independent spirit. She gets along well with the other guys' wives, except for Paul, who no longer has a wife. When the boys and I go to golf tournaments, the girls sometimes go on a spa weekend. The guys and I adhere to the principle, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, although we have not been to Vegas yet. This does not mean that something is happening in Vegas, but if suddenly we meet at a hen party on the Isle of Wight, and instead of golf there is something else, then no one at home will know about it. We were finishing the last 9 holes one summer evening when Paul asked if we wanted to go on another man's trip, this time further afield. This intrigued us, but no one wanted to be the first to show obvious interest, so we agreed, but without details. It was clear that this irritated Paul, and 3 holes later, as I was preparing to putt, he said, Ibiza. Oh, good job, idiot, I complained. I cut off the blow because of you, because you distracted me. I'll hit again, this one doesn't count. The others decided that I wouldn't shoot again because I always cut my shot when I try to play 5, and why don't I admit that I'm a lousy player and not use a driver or a hockey stick? Assholes. So what about Ibiza? I asked, resigned to the fact that my friends had correctly assessed my golf abilities. Paul leaned against his driver. Oh, are you interested now? Well, you all know Canny Mike. We really all knew Canny Mike. He tried to give the impression that he was a shady businessman with his fingers in many affairs, when in reality he was probably no more shady or influential than my Aunt Vera, which I don't have. He was nicknamed Canny Mike because he was from the Northeast and often used the word canny, which meant good or attractive. So yeah, we said we all know Canny Mike. He has a villa in Ibiza, 5 bedrooms, bathrooms, satellite TV, next to a golf course. He said I could use it for free for a week. Barry immediately chimed in. That's the price I like, and the chicks in Ibiza are hot. I'm in. Ken was less sure. Canny Mike wants to look suspicious. What's the catch? I agreed. Free housing is one thing, but being in debt to a local small-time shady businessman is another. Paul gave us a condescending smile, saying, I'm smarter than you. Last week we were haggling, and I mentioned that I was going to take a holiday at the beginning of September. It was a busy season, and I needed a break. Then he offered me his villa. He himself cannot go, but he needs to bring a couple of antique watches for his mother. Her birthday is in October, and he wants them to be here. He himself cannot go, and he will not send his son either because of his electronic bracelet. Everyone wins. I admit it sounded less suspicious when he explained everything. Okay, I'm in. A man's trip, huh? Without wives, so as not to interfere. The others were also in favor. We finished the game, drank a couple of beers at the club, and went our separate ways. A couple of weeks later, Abigail returned from the store with a couple of bags from Next, unfortunately nothing from Victoria's Secret, and with great irritation. Were you going to go and not tell me, or were you going to tell me right before you left, you freak? I pretended I didn't understand what she was talking about, but it only lasted, I don't know, a minute. Don't lie to me. You and your golfing girlfriends are going on a boys' trip to Ibiza, leaving us at home to nicely await your return. Do you really think that I will let you go and put on airs in front of these prostitutes without me? Either I'm going or you're not going. Or you go, but I won't go, and you don't have to come back. I realized that I had lost and made several calls. Barry and Coop had been in similar situations before, and Paul laughed at me and reminded me that he had no wife, no problem, as he said, the smug fool. Finally, on the second weekend of September, the three wives and the final girlfriend found ourselves in the lounge at Southend International Airport with us. Ken couldn't go because some stupid girl was trying to scam him out of £10,000 to keep him quiet after they slept together. When he refused to pay, she sent the photos to his wife. Her face was not visible in the photo, and Ken did not say anything, but he suddenly needed all his money to pay for a lawyer and rent a squalid apartment. His brother Coop came with us. We've met him before, and he turned out to be a normal guy. To Paul's credit, the house truly lived up to his description. 5 large double bedrooms, satellite TV in each, a swimming pool, a jacuzzi for 10, sun loungers, and a golf course next door. I dumped my bags in our room and went to the kitchen. The large 2-compartment refrigerator was pre-filled according to our order. Fortunately, the girls took charge of this issue, so it was filled with more than just beer. There was tonic and lemonade. No, there was food there too. I took a cold bud and went out onto the terrace between the house and the pool. Paul's girlfriend had already taken a seat on one of the sun loungers. I admired the view. 2 hills were covered in bright yellow. I say covered, but it was a few spots of bright yellow and a V-shaped cut of yellow fabric below. Abigail came up to me and poked me lightly in the side. If you're going to stare at her breasts, you could do it a little less noticeably. I pretended that I didn't understand what she was talking about. Paul joined us and also looked in that direction, at the same impressive view I had just appreciated. Hey, Genevieve, we discussed this. He almost snapped his fingers at her. I had a hard time not to envy this lack of attitude. If I said that to Abby, she would give me a dressing down, even if I was right. Genevieve sat down, unclasped the top of her tiny bikini, and tossed it under the lounge chair before relaxing again. Paul walked over, pecked her on the lips, and his hand went to her perfectly formed breast to squeeze it lightly. That's better, dear. I suggested that Abby change clothes and sunbathe, but she just looked at me and, saying something about unpacking her things, went inside. The rest of the guys came out and joined me with beer. Coop took out cigarettes, and we all lit up. This is our tradition. When we leave, we take Marlboro Lights with us. Barry and Coop immediately noticed the scenery, and we decided that we should convince our wives to sunbathe topless too. Sharon, Barry's wife, had the biggest breasts, but that was because there were a lot of them everywhere, not that she was fat, just a little neglected after the children moved in with her first husband. Barry didn't seem to care, but if Sharon wanted them back, he always said he would convince her ex, just like they did in the Legion. Coop's wife, Michelle, would also have a great figure without a bikini, but she's so modest that I couldn't imagine her going for it without a lot of wine. However, Abby was usually willing to do something like this when we were away from home, so I figured we would keep our word. Paul is back. Who wants to play the first round, guys? He shouted enthusiastically. I raised the bottle of Bud. I'd like another one, mate. He looked at me like I was an idiot. No, I mean a quick 9 holes before going out for the evening. The girls can stay here, and... He hesitated, as if he didn't know what women do to chat. We grabbed our clubs and headed for the exit. Part of me wanted to stay to see if our wives would actually take off their swimsuit tops, But I decided that with Genevieve, I had already seen the best it had to offer, and Abby was next on the list, and she was someone I could look at any time. We played for about 3 hours with beer, well, mostly beer, and returned to the villa around 6 in the evening. Come on, ladies, let's go to dinner. Are you not ready yet? What were you doing here? Paul was drunker than all of us and was willing to take risks that I wouldn't allow myself, and the obedient Genevieve clearly helped him in this. If he hadn't started screaming, we might have had a chance to see them topless, but his screams got everyone up and the three wives ran into the house, buttoning up their swimsuit tops or, in Sharon's case, adjusting their backless one-piece. Still, it was nice to know that they did as we told them. We found a restaurant nearby where the menu was in English. I ordered a T-bone steak with onions, fried rings, fries, and peas, as did Barry and Coop. Abby chose something fishy, Michelle and Sharon took paella for two, and Genevieve asked about the vegetarian menu. Pavel was surprised and asked since she was a vegetarian, and then ordered himself a lobster and a salad for her. We drank about 6 bottles of wine and laughed out loud until the waiter said they were closing, and we headed back to continue the party. Somewhere during dinner, Abby started telling stories about her travels in Australia before we met. I knew she and her friend Beanie were having a good time, but she never told me the juicy details, echoing my words. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. It seemed like the wine and the company had loosened her tongue. She started telling everyone how she and Beanie hitchhiked from Sydney to Cairns in 2 weeks and what crazy things they did along the way. Beanie, Abby explained, was very tall, almost 6 feet, blonde with, and I can't believe my wife said it, breasts to die for and an ass you'd want to lick maple syrup off. Honey, what are you doing? I asked, trying to calm her down. I tell them how we hitchhiked. It's easy to find a car when you have a girl like that with you. She stood up and quickly went into the house, leaving behind her a silence full of anticipation. Michelle looked at Sharon for support and then turned to me. I think she's a little upset that you ran off to play golf so quickly. I looked around in complete bewilderment. It's a golf vacation. What did she expect? Abby returned a minute or two later, wearing short shorts and a shirt with sleeves. Barry, can you help? She asked, directing our burly former paratrooper to the sleeves. He grabbed them and looked at her with a questioning look. She nodded, yes, go ahead, and he tore the sleeves, leaving ragged edges where they used to be. That's how we started hitchhiking. She showed how she held out her hand with her thumb up, swaying her hips. And every time we undid one button, she unfastened the first one and rocked her hips again. Nothing much has changed. One more, she undid another button. Boys, tell me when to stop. She gave me a look that could have frozen the fire. Don't tell me. 2 more buttons were undone, and it was now clear that she was braless and her breasts were threatening to burst out with every movement. None of my so-called friends said anything. Abby continued. So far no one has stopped, and don't forget that Bina's breasts are much better than mine. Paul chimed in. Your breasts look great, Abby. It didn't make me feel any better. Thanks, Paul. It's nice to be appreciated for once. She undid the last button and turned around again, almost completely exposing her breasts to our amazed eyes. We did this sometimes, she added conspiratorially, tucking in her shirt. Now her every movement exposed her breasts. Michelle and Sharon were shocked, but in a "oh my God, our friend is so crazy" kind of way. Genevieve tapped on the phone while Barry, Paul, and Coop watched with amusement. And once we did this, she took off her shirt completely and stood up with her hand out with her thumb up, now completely topless. And we spent the whole trip as a thank you for giving us a ride. With a sly smile, she sat down at the table opposite me, topless, and poured herself a glass of wine. Honey, put your shirt back on, I told her. Why, you can sunbathe topless by the pool, but not at dinner? I thought you wanted your friends to look at my breasts. Don't you love that they can see me? I knew that no matter how I answered, it would result in her sleeping in one room and me in another, or even on the floor. I simply waved both hands in her direction and muttered, "Whatever," and then took the beer. Paul signaled to Genevieve that it was time for bed. "Come on, it's time to go to bed," he said enthusiastically. On the way out, Paul stopped and kissed Abby, and it wasn't just a friendly kiss. His hand slid to her chest, and he lightly squeezed her breast with his thumb. Abby responded with a loud and intensified the kiss. This was already too much. I placed the bottle on the glass table with a thud. "I am still here, by the way." She gave me an icy look. "Oh, calm down. I just kissed him good night, like you did on the Isle of Wight." I froze. "Isle of Wight? What? Who said this? We agreed no talk about what happens on the road." She grinned. "Nobody said anything. I started to get suspicious when you came home, washed your clothes yourself, and didn't want to have sex for 2 weeks. You just confirmed everything yourself." Coop, feeling guilty, suddenly realized that he had not been on that trip, so he had nothing to confess. Barry fidgeted nervously, turned to Sharon, and denied that anything had happened. As a counterattack, he tried to ask, "What about your spa days? What's going on there, huh?" All three women laughed, almost pointing at him, and Genevieve, passing by on the way to the bedroom, added, "I think you know that nothing happens at spa days, honey. Good night." It was the end of the evening. I spent an unpleasant night on the bedroom floor. Sharon and Michelle carried on as usual, and Paul and Genevieve provided us with a soundtrack of moaning and creaking bed springs. This girl was quite loud. The next morning, Saturday, I woke up feeling groggy and stiff from sleeping on the floor, but Abby seemed to be in great spirits. She brought me coffee and invited me onto the bed, pressed herself against me, and started kissing me. I was sensible and kissed her back enthusiastically. Her hand slid inside my boxers. I was already on the verge when she stopped and, jumping into the shower, said, "You can finish it yourself if you want, I don't mind. Or think about it all day and see what happens in the evening." I stayed in bed watching Soccerem, which was covering the upcoming derby between Manchester United and Manchester City. I made a mental note that it wouldn't hurt to watch it. It starts at 5 p.m. UK time, so we could be at the bar by then. Abby, by the way, quite liked football, so I was sure that it could be proposed without risk. She left the bathroom door open, and my excitement gradually subsided as I watched her take a shower, when suddenly Barry poked his head through the door. "Listen, we were thinking of playing a quick 18 holes this morning. How about?" he asked. Abby shouted something from the bathroom, but I couldn't make out what it was, and neither did Barry, so I automatically took a step forward to hear better. She had just finished her shower and was standing naked, drying herself with a towel, when he turned and did a surprised double glance. She didn't seem to mind at all and continued to slowly pat herself with the big fluffy towel. "Hi, Barry. Were you talking about golf?" "Yeah, come on, Dave. Go play and I'll go to the beach with the girls." Barry tried to answer, but something came out like, "Bell. Abby." She looked at herself. "Oh, I'm stupid. Sorry, Barry, did I scare you?" She then wrapped the towel around herself, covering her breasts, and pressed her curvy figure into her plunging cleavage. Barry watched for a while longer, and then seemed to come to his senses and quickly ran out with a mutter, "See you on the field in 20 minutes. "What was that?" I asked irritably. "Oh, come on, Dave. You yourself wanted me to sit by the pool naked, or at least topless. Why don't you like it if I do it somewhere else? I didn't know he was coming. So, are you going to help yourself? Would you like a towel?" Feeling exhausted, I ignored her and went into the shower, leaving the door open so she could see that I hadn't finished what she started. She, of course, was deliberately watching me while she was putting on her bikini and t-shirt. "Okay, let's see what happens next. Enjoy your golf game, and I'll see you for dinner." The guys and I played the full 18 holes, and then another game using the Stableford system. We returned to the club at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We sat on the veranda, drank cold Estrella, smoked, and discussed how the world works. "Sorry about Abby yesterday, guys. I don't know what came over her. She seems to be in a better mood today." Barry blushed and Paul suggested that he knew what needed to be done to get her straightened out. I told him to keep his hands to himself next time. Coop tried to take on the role of peacemaker and got us to calm down and apologize to each other. We returned to the villa around 5 o'clock to find the girls already done with makeup and ready to go. Abby wore a low-cut red top and tight shorts. She leaned over to scratch her toes, and I noticed her thong peeking out from under her shorts and also got a nice view of her breasts, which Coop noticed very well. I wasn't sure if she did it on purpose, but when she repeated the trick in front of Paul, I knew for sure that it was on purpose. "What are you doing?" I whispered, not wanting to make a fuss. "Oh, these new shoes are a little tight. I'm just trying to break them in." The shoes were clearly not hers, 4-inch stilettos and thin black leather straps. My guess was that she took them from Genevieve. I realized that I would not win this argument, so I backed down. The taxis arrived, and we headed into the city center, where we found a nice Chinese restaurant with a TV behind the bar, so I never missed the match. 2-0 to City, Sterling scored both goals from 10 yards. What, darling? I was distracted by the second goal. It was simply gorgeous, right into the corner of the goal, where the goalkeeper could not reach. I said, "Paul and Genevieve are going to the dance. Can we go with them? Barry and Sharon and Coop and Michelle will come home if we don't go, but they're ready to come dance with us." Dancing. Damn dancing. There are few things I hate more than dancing, and she knew it. By making the entire evening dependent on my yes, she knew that I would not be able to say no. So I agreed, knowing I would hate it. And of course she knew I would hate it. It turned out to be even worse than I imagined. The crowds, the heat, and all these people whom I couldn't even understand, were they guys or girls? Abby danced with Paul, and to be honest, he kept his hands to himself, which was a good thing. Then she danced with Genevieve, and they got a little too close, which again made me think about her journey with Beanie. That blonde, she said, had breasts to die for and an ass to lick maple off. Syrup. Barry and Coop danced with Michelle and Sharon, twirling around their purses until Abby and Genevieve pulled them out for a slow dance. Paul was left with 2 other wives. At some point, I noticed Barry sleeping in the corner. I woke him up and asked how he managed to fall asleep in such a place. He winked at me and said, "Airborne training, brother. I can sleep anywhere." Then he asked for a pint of beer. 12 euros later, I brought him a beer and saw him chatting with someone in black PVC. Barry introduced the creature to me as Renee, but that didn't clarify anything about its gender. Renee was working on a whale-watching boat and offered to take us all out the next day. "Can I pay now?" 60 euros for all of us. It was officially the worst night of my life when Abby came back and made it even worse by forcing me onto the dance floor. Her red top was wet, I think from sweat, and clung to her like a second skin. It was obvious that she wasn't wearing a bra, but even that couldn't lift my spirits. I spent 2 dances with her, awkwardly waving my arms and shuffling my feet, praying to a god I didn't believe in for a meteorite to end my misery, or at least for Guns N' Roses to start playing. Neither happened, and I was in my own personal hell. Genevieve took over from me, placing her hands on Abby's chest and whispering something in her ear. Abby nodded, and the younger girl sent me back to our table, where Paul sat with his head in Sharon's ear, as if they were sharing some secret together. Sharon laughed so hard I thought it was a joke. Annoyed that everyone but me was having fun, I grabbed the bag I was told to bring and walked back out onto the dance floor. Genevieve pulled out a silk scarf and handed it to Abigail, who took off her top in the middle of the dance floor and tied the scarf around her chest, improvising a new top. She had to experiment with her style several times, and any cynical person would say that this was done to attract more attention. She eventually settled on a crisscross style that hugged each breast, leaving them almost completely on display. She tossed me a sweat-soaked top and sent me back to the table. We left the club around 4 in the morning, barely able to move. Abby was still in her scarf top and my ears were ringing. I just wanted to go to bed. I collapsed on the bed and fell asleep, barely hearing her words. "Well, if you don't want me to finish." I slept until 10 in the morning, Woke up completely exhausted in the same clothes that I wore the night before. There was no way I wanted to play golf today, no matter what everyone else said. Strangely, the girls were already on their feet and sitting in the sun, and I was the only man in sight. To my delight, they were all sunbathing topless, even Michelle, who turned out to have cute small breasts, probably B-cups, but they were very perky. Sharon was the largest. Her breasts were so large that when she lay on her back, they hung down into her armpits. I grabbed coffee from the kitchen and walked out to them with a Marlboro Light cigarette. My plans for the day consisted of sitting in the sun and recuperating, which suited me just fine. I wanted to go to the beach to look at the local girls in bikinis, although Abby was with me, but no one forbids just looking. Paul appeared after a while, pointed at Genevieve and motioned for her to come inside. She rolled her eyes, but still stood up and followed him. After a while, we heard the sounds of her screams. She was again very active in bed, shouting Paul's name. About 20 minutes later, they returned. Paul looked like a cat who had received the cream, and Genevieve continued her conversation with Michelle as if nothing had happened. When Coop and Barry finally came out, it was already around noon. We decided to go grab a bite to eat at a cafe that promised to serve a full English breakfast at any time of the day. There's nothing better than toasted bread in the hot sun and a glass of Estrella beer while watching the girls in bikinis on the beach. I moved a piece of fried bread around the plate, collecting the remaining sauce from the egg and beans, belched involuntarily, and asked Abby to repeat what she said. I say, "What time do we leave for that boat you paid for last night? And where does she sail from? What the hell is this? Oh yes, 60 euros. This strange guy is in PVC. I have no idea. Barry organized it. I just paid." Barry looked embarrassed, and when he's embarrassed, his tough guy personality kicks in. He poked my chest with his finger. "Don't you dare blame me, you yourself, a fool, didn't ask for details. You blew 60 euros, not me." I looked around for support, but everyone else chose to stick to the "it's not my problem" policy. For a moment, I thought I saw a strange expression on Abigail's face, but as soon as I saw it, it disappeared. I decided that the lack of cover is worth the Pole 50 euros, so I shut up and followed everyone to the beach. The beach was everything I had hoped for. Lithe young men in tiny thongs, looking adorable with their pert breasts and asses. Having said that, Genevieve, Abby, and Michelle garnered admiring glances as they strolled along the beach, Sharon less so, but she was the only one of our group who remained covered up, so whose fault was it? The day went on. I continued to apply factor 30 and dozed in the sun. Barry and Coop decided that we wouldn't go out tonight. We'd order takeout pizza and stay home. As Barry so eloquently put it, we had to try out the damn jacuzzi and all. By 6, the beach was deserted and the sun was starting to lose its heat, so we went back and ordered 3 large pepperonis, 3 large seafood dishes, and a medium vegetarian portion for Genevieve. We wiped our greasy fingers with a kitchen towel, threw the pizza boxes in the trash, and went out onto the deck. Paul turned on the jacuzzi, the internal leads turned blue, he pressed another button, and the bubble jets started working. "The last one with the smell of cheese," he announced, kicked off his shoes, and jumped in fully dressed, throwing away his wet shirt and shorts. I went back to my room to put on my swim trunks. Barry had creepy sneakers, Coop had big shorts. Genevieve stepped out in a bikini just in time to see Paul's pants being thrown overboard. "The rules are, the dress code is the same as mine," he shook his finger at her. "Come on, take it off." She hesitated for a moment, and then obediently left the two. Abby came out in a robe, walked to the bathtub, threw off her robe, modestly covered her breasts with her hands, and climbed into the bathtub, settling down next to me. Michelle and Sharon came out in swimsuits and stood next to their husbands. Paul took on the role of master of ceremonies, sending Coop and Sharon to fetch gin, tonic, ice, and glasses, pouring large portions for everyone. He began a drinking game involving word games and hand-waving, the aim of which appeared to be to get as much gin into the girls' hands as quickly as possible. After the third round, he tried to lift Genevieve onto his lap, which seemed to be the last straw for her. She pushed him, slapping him and cursing, "Fuck you, Paul, you're not paying me enough for this. You want the full girlfriend experience, it's £100 an hour. Those 50 a day that you give me are about to bring you breasts and sex a day, and not in front of your vile friends and their long-suffering wives." She got out of the car, put on Abigail's robe, and headed to the room she shared with Paul, but probably not for long. As soon as she left, the girls surrounded Paul. "What does she mean by girlfriend? 150 a day. Is she a pro? She seems so sweet. How can she be a girl of easy virtue?" The guys all remained silent. Not that we were open-minded, it just wasn't that surprising to us. Paul admitted years ago that he was happy to rent affection by the hour, but that was subject to Vegas rules, so we never discussed it at home. The mention of prostitutes angered Abigail again, and she recounted the craziest moments of her gap year. We didn't charge anyone for it, but one day we were in a bar in Brisbane, and I went into the toilet, and while I was out, this guy came up and asked if she wanted to have a party and how much it cost. I came back and she said she left. He asked how much, and she said to pay her what she was worth. He insisted on installing the piece. She again refused, and he arrested her for extortion. He was an undercover cop. Once everything was settled, she still went home with him. She was greeted with howls of laughter, and then Barry asked what the craziest thing she'd ever done was. "Well, I told you about hitchhiking. There was one time when we were traveling with cardboard signs with the name of the city we were going to. I changed her sign to one that said, 'I love sex,' so she changed mine to another saying, 'I'll blow you up to give you a ride.' Something went wrong when someone stopped and said, 'Okay, he was pretty nice, so I did.'" Sharp gasps echoed through the pool. "And then there was this incident where I was sharing a flat in Portsmouth before I met Dave, and I came home from work when one of the girl's boyfriends came over. She was working a late shift, so I invited him in and had sex with him." "Okay, Abby, that's enough," I told her. "They don't need to hear your dirty stories." Everything went well. She attacked me. "What do you mean dirty? I was a girl who had a good time. There's nothing dirty about it." "Okay, baby, but what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas." "Ibiza is not Vegas," she spat. "Okay, but you're acting like a prostitute having sex with your housemate's boyfriend." Oh boy. Well, I didn't think this would happen. Everyone fell silent. Abigail stood in the middle of the bath. "A girl of easy virtue? Damn prostitute? Well, if you think so, this prostitute will be slutty. What should I do? Do you want to see me naked? Look, a naked girl of easy virtue." She tore off her bikini pants and threw them across the terrace to smash against the window. Sharon and Michelle hurried away, wisely wanting to get away from the oncoming explosion. Barry and Coop stayed for the same reason. Abby threw water at me in anger. "A girl of easy virtue had sex with her roommate's boyfriend. Genevieve is my neighbor. I had sex with her boyfriend, okay? Stand up, Paul. Look." Paul looked almost as shocked as I did. Abby yelled at him to get up again, and he looked at me nervously. I didn't understand what was happening. I looked at him with wild eyes, wanting him to run away, but not daring to say anything. Paul finally got up, although I hoped he would leave. But no, this bastard stood right in front of her, just 2 steps away. Abigail shot me another furious look, then stepped towards him and knelt down. "Don't ever call me a prostitute," she said coldly. She reached out and touched him, guiding him towards her with a quick, confident movement. I was shocked by what was happening, but I couldn't look away. Her actions were deft, and despite the awkwardness of the situation, I could not ignore what was happening. I saw how she carried out everything with such diligence that she had never shown before. She seemed to be doing her best, and it was all happening right in front of me. Paul began to breathe raggedly, warning of the inevitable. She looked at him, finishing what she started with a confidence that made me feel even worse. "Well," she said, licking her lips, "I was ready to sleep with him, but now the moment is gone. You missed your chance. Now go to Genevieve and apologize properly." She turned to the remaining guys. "Sorry, guys, maybe next time. And now I'm going to bed. Dave will sleep on the street. As she leaned over to step over the edge of the jacuzzi, she gave Barry and Coop one last show by nudging their slack jaws upward with her finger. The next morning, I woke up at sunrise on a sun lounger, covered with a slightly damp towel. Again, Abby seemed to be in an oddly good mood despite the events of the previous night. She brought me coffee and a cigarette. Then she reached under the towel, grabbing me tightly between my legs. In a matter of minutes, I was ready again as never before. She then stood up and jumped into the shower, saying as she went, "You can finish it yourself if you want, or offer Genevieve €100. I thought about what I could offer Genevieve, but the prospect of walking around the house, constantly excited, put the thought aside. I waited until the excitement subsided and went to take a shower and change clothes in our room. Abigail was just finishing her makeup and greeted me with a kiss. All this seriously bothered me, but I decided to just go with the flow and not raise unnecessary questions. Breakfast passed in silence until Genevieve and Paul emerged, looking like a devoted couple. Abby was the first to greet them. "Good morning, Paul." "Good morning, Genevieve." Genevieve replied, "Well, now that you know the whole truth, do you want me to stay? I would understand if you asked me to leave." Heads nodded in refusal of this proposal. "No, stay. We love you more than Paul." Abby could be cruel sometimes. Coop timidly suggested playing 18 holes. Sharon and Michelle thought it was a great idea, so off we went to golf. Barry tried to start a conversation about last night, but I cut him off abruptly. "I'm not going to discuss it. Nothing happened, okay?" He nodded and, going up to Paul, asked, "So, was she good?" and dodged my club in time, which I swung to hit him on the head. Paul just shook his head, indicating that nothing was worth discussing, but still added quietly, when he thought I wouldn't hear, "Just great, man." We finished the game around noon. I didn't want to leave the girls for a long time. You never know what could be brewing there, so we went home as soon as we finished the game. When we got home, the first thing we did was take a shower. And then I found out what was really brewing. I was standing in the shower, soaping myself, when I felt a slight draft. I turned to see Sharon stepping into the shower with her swimsuit pulled down to her waist. She came close to me. She began to caress me. She then knelt in front of me and poured some shower gel onto her chest. I was already on the verge when she suddenly stood up, washed the gel off her chest, and left, saying goodbye. "You can finish it yourself if you want. I don't mind." And she disappeared. Puzzled and almost enraged, I turned on the cold water, which instantly cooled both my body and my thoughts. I managed to get rid of my excitement so that I could at least put on my pants. When I returned to the kitchen, Genevieve greeted me with the words, "We are going to lunch. The taxi is on its way." This seemed like a great idea to me. We were divided into two groups, men separately, women separately. "So, guys," I began, "how did you like the shower?" The others looked at me in bewilderment and took turns answering "fine" and "what's wrong?" So this only happens to me. Likely. A large Mercedes minivan arrived a few minutes later and dropped us off at the restaurant 15 minutes later. The sign read La Mirabelle. French restaurant, damn it. I'm not a big fan of French cuisine, but I think they probably have steak, and that will be enough. We were shown to the table. The waiter took our drink orders and brought us the menu. Everything is in French. Abigail suddenly had an idea. "Barry, you should know French after serving in the French Foreign Legion. Can you translate it for us?" All eyes were fixed on our red-faced, bald, strong Barry. He hesitated. "Well, you see, here's the thing. I did a ton of training with the British paratroops when I was training Special Forces, so when I joined the Legion, I was sent straight into a Special Forces unit where everyone spoke English. And the French that I knew, I had already forgotten." My wife slyly leaned closer to him. "Oh, Barry, if you were in the Special Forces, I would feel much more at ease." He puffed out his chest smugly and kept his eyes on her cleavage. Luckily, Genevieve knew more than "Bonjour, je m'appelle Dave" French, and we were able to place our order. 5 bottles of wine significantly lifted the mood of the whole company. The restaurant the girls chose turned out to be in an area with many cafes, bakeries, and bars. Michelle chose a large open bar, crowded with young people, and we headed there. The bar wasn't bad. Personally, I wish there were TVs with something not in French, but some of them showed French League One, which would also pass for entertainment. Michelle must have thought of everything in advance, because we were shown to our reserved table by a tall waiter with an over-the-top accent. The girls immediately began to court him. Beers, and lots of them. Barry loudly ordered for all of us, which saved us time. Coop and Michelle decided to skip the beer and ordered a bottle of wine. Sharon, Abigail, and Genevieve quickly joined them, and we ended up with 3 bottles of wine and 6 glasses of beer on the table, because the guys clearly emptied their glasses faster than the girls. We spent the rest of the day laughing and drinking, and sometimes drinking and laughing. The topic of Abigail's past did not come up, which I was incredibly happy about, although it was noticeable that Barry had been making plans all this time in case she wanted to once again prove something to me with her behavior. He kept his eyes on her breasts, sometimes even licking his lips, so obvious that Sharon began to get angry and began to flirt with the waiter to make him jealous. Barry had always had a short temper, and I had a feeling that he might sometimes lay a hand on Sharon to put her in her place. I'm not talking about a real beating, that would be wrong, but something like a light blow so that she knows who is in charge. Seeing how cheerfully she was communicating with the young Frenchman, Barry immediately became furious and sharply waved his finger. "Hey, stop it, Shaz. You're embarrassing yourself. This mama's boy has no interest in an old fool like you. Tell him to get lost, and quickly." The waiter apologized to Sharon and retreated to the bar, where they clearly discussed something, but nothing else happened. Barry seemed pleased with himself, addressing everyone, but looking straight into Abby's cleavage. That's the way it should be. Not a step back, only forward. This is what I learned in the Legion, not to give up. Show them who's boss. And now more beer. He snapped his fingers and waved his hand. A young waitress, probably 21 or 2, dressed in tight leggings and a striped t-shirt, approached us with 3 pints of beer on a tray. Barry pointed to the table in front of him. "Put it here, sweetheart. Put away the empty glasses and grab whatever you want while you lean over." He laughed. At least he thought his joke was funny. His meaty hand rested on her neck, keeping her bent over as she put away the glasses. The waitress broke away, dropped the tray of beer into his lap, and ran behind the bar. Barry was still grumbling when the bar manager approached us and started talking with obvious aggression. "It's good that you came. This stupid girl threw it all on me. I want her fired." The manager looked older, about 40, with a short gray-red beard and long hair tied into a short ponytail. He was of average height, but strongly built. The manager calmly, but firmly, with a slight accent, replied, "I have to ask you to leave, monsieur. You can't treat my employees like that. If these were just words addressed to Emil, I would still turn a blind eye to it, but for insulting Marin, no. You need to leave. Now." Of course, this couldn't end well. Barry stood up. He wasn't very tall, but had a large enough build to be a threat when he used his bulk. He leaned towards the manager, pointing his finger at him. "Listen to me, Pierre. I am a former legionnaire and a former paratrooper. Don't joke with me, otherwise I'll tear you apart. Do you understand me? Now bring this fool here, let her apologize, and I won't say another word." And then the manager's expression changed dramatically. "Legion, French Foreign Legion. Why didn't you tell me right away? What battalion did you serve in?" Barry immediately puffed up with pride like a turkey. "The best, of course, 1st Regiment." The manager shook his hand firmly. "Oh, so you served in the 1st Parachute Regiment of the Legion, which was based in Algeria." Barry beamed with pride. "Yes, exactly, in Algeria. 1st Parachute Regiment." The manager squeezed his hand tightly and, looking straight into his eyes, said, "So, you are 85 years old. The 1st Regiment was disbanded in 1961, and the French Foreign Legion has not operated in Algeria since 1962, after Algeria gained independence. I think you are a fictionalist. Liar. Now leave." Barry tried to pull his hand away to make a fist, but the manager twisted it with a deft movement, and in the blink of an eye Barry found himself on his knees, pinned to the floor in a painful hold. The manager leaned over and calmly said, "I'll let go of your hand when you go outside. Get up." And, still holding Barry's hand, he led him out the door. The rest of the men followed him. Paul began to escalate. "Hey, we can't leave this like this. There are 4 of us, guys." But I had a hunch that even 4 of us might not be able to handle this guy, and my hunch was confirmed when the manager was joined by the head waiter from the restaurant where we were dining. He was the same height and had the same confident and menacing manner as the bar manager, and they clearly knew each other. When we got outside, Barry was released and rose to his feet. When the manager turned away, Barry clenched his fist and punched as hard as he could, only to hit the air. The manager dodged, caught his hand, and sent Barry to the ground again. Paul, trying to look like Jason Statham, shouted, "Let's go, boys." But the head waiter simply shook his head and said, "Non." This instantly cooled Paul's ardor. Barry stood up again, lowered his head, and charged forward like a bull, but the manager deftly dodged again and Barry crashed into the wall, collapsing to the ground, broken and drenched in tears. Both Frenchmen picked him up as if he were an old bag of garbage and gently brushed his shirt off. The bar manager said in his ear, "You've never been a legionnaire, have you?" Barry shook his head. "What about the British paratroopers?" Barry shook his head again. "Who are you really?" the manager asked quietly. Barry sobbed, and his face seemed older, his skin sagging, and he seemed shorter than before. "I was in the cadets when I was a teenager. I was imprisoned when I was 18, and I told everyone that I served in the army. And when I was imprisoned again, I came up with a story about the Legion so that everyone would believe it and to gain respect." They released him, and he sank back to the ground, sobbing quietly. The bar manager looked at him with contempt. "Next time you decide to impersonate someone you're not, don't do it in a bar run by a former legionnaire. Now leave and never come back. Your friends can decide for themselves whether they stay or go." I looked around. Abigail, Michelle, and Genevieve were inside the bar, still at our table. Sharon stood next to me. She turned to the girls and shouted at them to come out. Genevieve paused at the bar and handed over a handful of money before joining us outside. Sharon looked at Barry, who was sitting on the ground, and nudged him with her foot. "Barry, you are a disgusting person. Now I see it. You and me, we're finished. You will never lay a hand on me again. I'll fly home this evening if I can find a ticket, and when I get back, I'll change the locks and leave your things in a box in the garden. Take them or don't take them. I don't care. I don't want to see you anymore." Sharon turned and walked away, and the girls followed. Coop followed them. Paul and I lifted Barry to his feet and dragged him through the streets until we reached an area painted bright orange, with a bar showing the Premier League and served by waitresses in tight t-shirts. We settled down there and ordered 3 glasses of Amstel beer. No one wanted to discuss the fact that Barry turned out to be a fabricator and that his entire life was built on lies. Instead, we made empty threats about what we would do to the bar owner and his head waiter friend if they dared come to Ipswich. When that source of comfort dried up, we started bad-mouthing Sharon, calling her a bitch and a bitch who took the opportunity to stab her in the back. Coop also came under fire for not supporting us, his friends, but even so we couldn't take it seriously. We returned to the villa 3 hours later, sneaking quietly through a side door, to find Barry's suitcases already sitting by the door with a printed boarding pass for the 11 p.m. flight to Gatwick and a note. "Taxi will be there at 8. Be in it. And don't come to my house again. My brother has already changed the locks. Sharon." I looked at my watch. 7:45. We looked at each other. "What are you going to do, Barry?" I asked. He sobbed and admitted that there was nothing he could do. He will go home and stay with Canny Mike in his security office next to his warehouse. I suspected that he would stay there for a long time. There was a bed and shower that were usually used for illicit meetings, but would now be used to give Barry a place to sleep. We all stood waiting for the taxi, helped him into it, and waved goodbye, promising to meet for a pint when we returned. Then, slightly guiltily, we went out onto the terrace, where Coop was already in the jacuzzi with our wives. I didn't see what was under the water, but not a single swimsuit strap was visible on the surface. Slick. Paul and I each grabbed a beer from the crate next to the jacuzzi and also stripped off our clothes and down to our underwear before plunging into the water. Genevieve sat on Paul's lap and wrapped her arms around his neck, nibbling on his ear. It was clear from her appearance that she was wearing nothing underwater. Abby kissed me on the cheek, showing off her lack of a swimsuit top, too. It was amazing. Hot water, cold beer, and a lot to see. My mood instantly improved. I asked what made Sharon change her mind and stay in the villa. Michelle spoke first. We convinced Sharon to stay. None of us wanted Barry to stay here because he would have been unbearable after everything that had happened. We told Sharon she could have a nice couple of days in the sun now that it's gone. Coop continued. I never liked him with his tough guy image, and he always cheated at golf. But since we all thought he knew how to fight, no one argued with him. Sharon, you're great. Paul and I were a little confused. On the one hand, he was our friend and deserved our support. On the other hand, everything they said was true. Barry was a bastard who beat his wife, and we did nothing to stop it. Paul was the first to give in. To hell with it. He left. Sharon added with a grin, now I won't be with him anymore. Abigail, nudging her in a friendly manner, added, now we'll have to find you someone good to brighten up the remaining days. The girls laughed like girls. Something was bothering me. I looked at Michelle and asked, how come we accidentally ended up in the only bar on the island run by a former Legionnaire? How far has this planning gone? Rather than deny any preparation or conspiracy, Sharon calmly told it like it was. Last night, after Abby gave Paula, well, a special treat, Barry came into our room and told me everything in great detail. He said that next time he would be at the reception himself. I replied that this did not suit me, that he was my husband, and we should not interfere in other people's marriages. But he slapped me a couple of times and told me that my opinion didn't matter. This morning I was in the kitchen with Abby, Michelle, and Genevieve when Abby said they'd probably tell us about it anyway, so she'd better explain it herself. And she told us everything. She told you how she played with your feelings because you made her really angry. At that moment, Barry entered the room. It turned out he was listening at the door. He came in and said one of us has to do something for you to continue to abuse you. He took me to the room, told me to put on a swimsuit, and watched as I walked into the shower with you. He said that now Abby will owe me, and that the next time she decides to do something to someone, you know what, she will do it for him. I felt disgusted by this revelation, but at the same time I could not help but think about how it excited me in my soul. For a moment I felt nervous again, but quickly suppressed this feeling, realizing that I had been manipulated. I was lucky I was underwater because something started to grow. Michelle continued the story. After Barry and Sharon left, we continued to look for a restaurant for lunch and came across La Mirabelle on TripAdvisor. There was a mention that the owner liked to discuss war stories with customers, and his friend at the next bar was a former Canadian Legionnaire. My original idea was just to see if Barry really spoke French, because I always thought he was making it all up. We booked both places via email until Barry returned. Abby added a little sheepishly, I didn't like the way he talked to you about the boat ride, so I was hoping he'd just make a fool of himself. As it turned out, he ended up setting himself up. And thank God, Sharon finished, clapping her hands. I looked at Paul and grinned. Looks like we're surrounded by real witches from Eastwick. Can I be with Michelle Pfeiffer? Crap. That's not what I said. Abby immediately loomed over me. Why, Michelle? Do you mean this, Michelle? She nodded towards Kupova's wife. Do you need her, not me? Why not Cher or Susan Sarandon? I tried to make excuses as quickly as possible, feeling that I was in complete trouble. But her growing anger quickly dissipated into laughter, and she sat on my lap, her hands beginning to pull my boxers under the water and then tossing them over the edge of the jacuzzi. Paul decided to try his luck. "Abby, maybe you'll change your mind. I would also like another sexual massage session." "Sorry, Paul," she replied with an amused grin. "Last night was a one-time thing. Now Dave needs to finish, so you can help him if you want." Paul, like me, was clearly not happy with the idea, which actually calmed me down a little. Abby began to walk around the hot tub, as if gathering votes, as if it were a meeting with an agenda. "Genevieve? No? Okay. Coop? Understood. Michelle? No? Fine. Sharon?" Sharon hesitated a bit, which made me wary. Did she know how much I wanted her to finish what she started in the shower? My inner voice screamed, "Come on, let's." "Well, I might as well finish what I started this morning," she finally said. Coop and Michelle immediately stood up and walked out of the jacuzzi. Michelle was topless, and her breasts still looked as attractive as before. Coop voiced them both. "We're not going to get involved in this. See you at breakfast." And so there were 5 of us left. Genevieve seemed absolutely calm. It probably came with her job as a call girl. Paul, on the other hand, was literally drooling as he waited for the free sex show right in front of his eyes. Sharon looked at Abigail as if seeking her permission, which irritated me terribly. After all, this is my body. Shouldn't I be asked what I want? But apparently no one was going to ask me. Abigail and Sharon exchanged a short, "Well, if you want," and "only if it doesn't bother you" dialogue that seemed unbearably drawn out to Paul and me. Finally, Sharon came over to me and told me to sit on the edge of the jacuzzi. There was a resounding yes in my head, but outwardly I tried to remain calm. Sharon knelt down on the plastic seat where I had just been sitting and spread my legs to get closer. "Wow, so what do we have here? We'll have to see what we can do about it." She started to pleasure me, then suddenly stopped. She calmly replied, "Oh, you can finish it yourself if you want. I don't mind." And she returned to her place next to Abby, cheerfully whispering to her. I started begging, "Abby, Sharon, please, don't leave me like this. I'm so close." They giggled again. Abby said, "If you're this close already, you might as well finish it yourself. It won't take long. We don't mind." I was tempted to follow their advice, but I met Paul's gaze, and the thought of pleasuring myself in front of him immediately discouraged all desires. Paul apparently thought the same thing. "No way, mate. I don't want to see this. Genevieve, get on with it." Genevieve stood up from his lap and placed her hands on her hips. "What?" she answered irritably. "Come on, finish it for him, and then we'll go into the room and you'll take care of me. Now I'm paying in full." She looked at him contemptuously and turned her gaze to Abby, who just shrugged. "Only if you want to, and not because he said so." It finally seemed like I would get what I wanted. Genevieve lowered herself in front of me and began to pleasure me. "Actually, for this real girlfriend experience, you fucking gave up your pig. Sharon, can I share with you tonight? Tomorrow I'm going home." I sank back into the water, disappointment etched into my soul, and I wondered where my good mood had gone. God, what a shitty trip it was, nothing like our last trip. I lay on my back, remembering that 3-day weekend on the Isle of Wight. 2 nights with Angie, an older woman. She was about 40 and I was 34. Had it really been 4 years? Damn, she was insatiable, demanding and inventive, having sex with me until exhaustion, demanding to go to the toilet one more time on the car ferry taking us back to the mainland. Unfortunately, she was also infected with chlamydia. Luckily, I didn't have sex with Abby before I found out and managed to avoid it until the antibiotics cleared it up. Abby, Genevieve, and Sharon climbed out, and at least I could still enjoy the sight of 6 pairs of different-sized breasts swaying their way inside. Paul and I sat in the bathtub, not wanting to get out. I think Paul was stunned by Genevieve, the woman he paid to be with him, refusing to be with him. To be honest, this characterizes him. I realized that I wouldn't be able to go down anytime soon, and mentally shrugging my shoulders, I climbed out. Paul complained that I might gouge his eye out. I invited him to kiss my ass, an exchange Oscar Wilde and George Bernard Shaw would have been proud of. Abby made the same funny joke. This time I suggested she do something about it. I told you to finish it yourself, I don't mind, because the girls and I would like that. Isn't it true? Genevieve and Sharon gave enthusiastic thumbs up as they poured the wine. It was the best offer I could get. I tried to negotiate for them to throw in the towels. Eventually Sharon took pity and exposed herself. I started pleasuring myself. Abigail looked on with an amused grin, Sharon seemed genuinely fascinated, and Genevieve looked bored. The next morning at breakfast, Coop and Michelle announced that they were going home that afternoon. They were on the same flight as Genevieve. Abby announced that we would go home on Wednesday, which was the next day. Sharon said she would do the same and spend the whole day by the pool. 2 days later, we were sitting in the kitchen at home. Sharon was with us. We had dropped her off from the airport and were just enjoying the beer in my suitcase and the wine for the girls. Abigail looked at me, tilted her head to the side, and asked, "Where are you going to live?" Not sure if I had heard wrong, I asked what she meant. She asked again, "Where are you going to live, because he won't be here anymore? We're done. I put a lot of effort into this marriage, and you angered him with that slap on the Isle of Wight, and where are you going to live? It's not that I don't care. Goodbye. Oh, and before you go, take a look at this." She picked up her phone, scrolled through the photos, and stopped at an episode where a couple had sex in apparently at least 3 different places. There was a car, and apparently, no hell, it was our bedroom and another bedroom. Damn it, it was her and Ken. I scrolled back and forth. It was definitely her. I was fascinated by the sex, but terrified that she was a participant in it. It's amazing that he found me asking for a selfie. I didn't send Ken's wife anything that could identify me, but she could see her husband and her bedroom. "Why the hell did you do that, you mad cow?" She looked at me with sad eyes. "There were 4 of you who went to the Isle of Wight. All 4 of you helped break up my marriage, so all 4 of you will suffer the consequences. That bitch gave you damn chlamydia, and I'm sure she's not the only one. We'll sell the house, I'll keep half the cat." I slammed the mug down. I was fine, and there didn't seem to be anything to argue about. Luckily, I was already packed and my golf clubs were in the car. I looked back at what had been my kitchen 10 minutes ago. "Babe, I'm sorry. It's just, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas." When she answered, her voice was strangely hard. "This is not Vegas." A few days later, the final part of her revenge became apparent when Paul was caught by customs for smuggling £250,000 worth of illegal substances in some antique watches. Olympic Games 2044. I still play golf with Coop sometimes. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click